What is going on, everyone? Dave here from Adventures with DWD, and welcome back to the channel. Today I will be reviewing the Salomon Speedcross 5 in all of its muddy glory. Before I begin, I purchased these Speedcross with my own money, and I have not been compensated by Salomon or any of its affiliates. And what I'm about to say are my thoughts and my thoughts only. So with all that out of the way, let's get going to the review. As with all my other running shoe reviews, I don't do an initial review. I will be doing all of my running shoe reviews with at least 150 kilometers of use. So as you can see, I have put well over 150 kilometers of use on these shoes, and these are my thoughts and opinions on the Speedcross 5 from Salomon. I've tried many different Salomon shoes over the years, and first of all, we'll start with the fit. Now, Salomon typically, or every other running shoe that I've had over the last 25 to 30 years, I've been a 10.5. Now, I bought these directly from Salomon. I bought a 10.5, as I usually do, and I find that the length of these actually is a little bit longer, probably about maybe not a half a size longer, but about a quarter size longer than every other Salomon shoe that I've worn, which is fine on my bigger foot, which is my left foot. But my right foot is there's quite a bit of room, probably about that much room, 2 centimeters approximately, on my right foot. It's not a problem, but just let you know that you might even want to drop down a half a size in these running shoes. I know I had to, and as I said, I've had hundreds of running shoes over the years, and this is the first pair of running shoes that were actually quite big. Now, for Salomon, they actually have quite a bit of room in the forefoot as well, which is, for me, it's nice to have. I don't have a really wide foot, but as you run longer, your feet will swell, so it's nice to have that extra bit of room in the forefoot as well. Back to the upper. They have a fully gusset tongue. Now, the tongue itself, if you can see here, the tongue itself is not sewn in place, but they have this very stretchy material. It's almost like a lycra material over the top of it, mesh lycra material, and that keeps any debris out of the upper. Very nice to have on trail shoes because you don't get anything inside your shoe, at least in this part of the shoe. They also have Salomon's famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, but I love Salomon's lace lock system. Salomon's lace lock system has this one pull system, and then what you do is pull it tight and tuck the laces in this little pocket. Very nice, keeps the laces out of the way. You don't trip on your laces. Now, in saying that, this pocket system is great, but I have a pair of Ultra Pros that the lace pocket comes in from the top, which is not a very good placement, so I haven't tried out any new Ultra Pros. I don't believe they've updated them since I've last bought them, but I prefer to have the lace pocket come up from underneath so that tucks away the laces. It's a great idea to have. The tongue itself has a great deal of padding, which is nice to have if you're in rough terrain. And the heel collar on the inside of the heel here has a great deal of padding. Now, it has its goods and its bads when you have that much padding on the heel counter. Nice and plush, comfortable, but I find that, first of all, there's two things, I guess. Number one is that I have some premature wear on the inside of the heel. I'm not sure if you can see that in the video, but my left shoe on the middle side of my left shoe have some premature wear there. And if you run in anything, for me anyways, if you run in anything more than 15 degrees Celsius, 20 degrees Celsius, I find these shoes very hot because there's not a lot of breathability on the upper. They have quite a bit of padding, even on the inside of the shoe, inside of the forefoot here, quite a bit of padding. And with the thick tongue and the thick heel counter, I find them quite hot. So if you are racing and training in warm conditions, you might want to look at a different running shoe than this. If you're okay with warm shoes, these are definitely a go-to. Now, with the heel counter, Yes, I mentioned that it is quite plush, but it sculpts nice underneath for the side of my heels. The lateral malleolus is called, the big bones on the sides of your heels, either the outside or the inside. Drops down nicely underneath here. I had a pair of Sense Ride a few years ago. I was mid-race and I had to actually take out a pair of scissors from my pack, a knife, Swiss Army knife, and I had to cut out a chunk from the lateral side, the outside of my Sense Rides, because this collar was digging into my heel, and it was not something that I experienced at all in any of my training runs. So from that point on, I'm very careful about just being aware of that height on my heel, because if you get that and it's rubbing in the middle of a race, it's hard to ignore that. To add to my last comment, pro tip number 1 for today is always be prepared to do minor surgery on either yourself or your equipment. Now, as far as the outsole has a very aggressive tread pattern. Nice and deep lugs. Lugs come up top here. You also have a couple of little points on the end here. They are very grippy in off trail. When you are in some very aggressive conditions, very difficult conditions, whether they be wet or snow-packed or a lot of rocky terrain, very nice to have this lug pattern. Salomon does a great job with their outsoles, and they use something called a Contigrip material. Doesn't really mean a whole lot to the average person. For me, though, it means that they are a very grippy rubber, so it's great to have on the outsole. Before I forget, go back to the upper here. The upper itself has a lot of these welded overlays, like here, and like on the toe here as well. Lots of extra bits of rubber that will help you protect your foot when you get into thorns and rocky area and trip over the occasional porcupine or something like that. It's nice to have in that upper. Going back to the outsole, if you encounter any type of pavement or hard packed surface, I personally would be very careful with that, because these are not meant for running on pavement. Because they have such a grippy outsole, and there is not a ton of cushioning on the forefoot of this shoe. In the heel, there's quite a bit. In the forefoot, there's not. There actually is a 10 millimeter drop, which means that the thickness of the sole, midsole material on the heel to the front of the shoe is called the forefoot. It's a 10 millimeter drop, which makes it quite a bit of a drop. For a running shoe, trail shoe, for me, it's okay to have. I prefer to have a little bit less of a drop from the heel to the forefoot, around about an 8 millimeter for technical terrain, because sometimes I feel that it's a little bit unstable going through rocky and technical terrain just because of that drop. It feels like I'm going downhill a little bit. But the aggressive lug pattern and the width of the forefoot make up for that excessive drop. They are definitely not the lightest shoe on the market. For a size 10.5, I will put the weight up on the screen. They're not the lightest shoe that you can buy, but they are made for nasty conditions when you're going to get covered in dirt, grime, blood, whatever the case may be. So a few extra grams in a trail shoe that's this aggressive, that you could also use, I believe, for hiking as well, light hiking. A few extra grams is not going to make that much of a difference. So where am I going to use this shoe going forward? As I mentioned, I have close to 200 kilometers already on this shoe. Any really long adventures, looking at 50K and above, I probably will not use this shoe because of a couple of things. Number one is how warm the shoe is, and number two is the thickness of the material in that forefoot here. It's not thick enough for me, it's not comfortable enough for me to run in anything longer than 50K would be pushing it. But if I had a 50K event, there's one scheduled for Canmore, which is close to Calgary, here in October. If I have these shoes still and haven't put too many kilometers on, it's a very technical, rocky, muddy 50K ultra marathon trail, I would definitely use these shoes in a case like that. There's a little bit of road that we have to run on, but it's not that big of a deal for running in a race. Anything longer than 50 kilometers though, I'm going to switch over to a different type of shoe. Say the Salomon Ultra Pro would be my shoe of choice for anything that is more than about 50K. Just overall more comfort, not as aggressive of an outsole, which is not necessary in that type of event. So if you're looking for a shoe that can get you through any nasty conditions, muddy, boggy, wet conditions, lots of hard packed snow, rocks, roots, etc., look no further than the Salomon Speedcross 5. I know they are a very popular shoe in the trail racing community, and there's a reason for that. And as I mentioned, I would also use these on any hikes that don't involve a ton of technical work where you have to scramble, etc. These are going to be these will be a great shoe to use in those conditions. So those are my thoughts on the Salomon Speedcross 5 after approximately 200 kilometers. If you found this review educational and or entertaining, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel, and thanks for watching. Peace.